Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. Glad to come to you. I don't take lightly that you pay me a little bit of mind and want to hear what I have to say. More importantly, you want to hear what the scripture has to say, and you're game to look at it from a Jewish perspective, and I super appreciate that. We are in jail. I say, Jeffrey, what did you do? You look like you're coming from your studio. Well, in the 5th chapter of Acts, chapter 5, verse 12 and on, the disciples get jammed up, they get arrested, they get spirited out secretly and miraculously, they get rearrested. This is going before the courts, and my God, what are we going to do? And it culminates in a leader amongst the Hebrew people standing up and making a statement. And I want to begin with that and then waddle my way through it. Actually, before I get to that, I want to just tell a little story that I think you'll relate to if you are a boy, a male, or if you've raised males or been around them. Everybody knows that little boys want to be on a winning team. There's something about athletics. I think it's partly testosterone driven, frankly, that little boys so get into sports. And not only do little boys so get into it, when little boys grow up and become big boys, we're all interested in our national teams or in our city teams. You know, go Dallas Cowboys. Why do you support the Dallas Cowboys? Well, because I'm in Dallas. You know, everybody wants a winning team. You want to support the home team, the winning team. And if you're in sports, everybody wants to be on the winning team. I mention that because when we enter into the narrative here, there's a story where the religious elites are befuddled. They just don't know what to do. This is just getting out of hand. And one of the ranks, a respected religious leader in the Jewish world, stands up. His name is Gamaliel in verse 34, and Luke notes that he was very respected. And these guys are tripping over themselves with angst, wanting to, put this genie in the bottle. They see there's this Jesus movement, this Yeshua movement that's getting a lot of traction street level. And, the question is what do we do with it? If you'll enter into verse 38 with me, he makes a statement to them that to me is profound. He says, if this plan or undertaking is of men, it will come to an end. But if it is of God, you will not be able to stop them. Well, I want to stop there. I think that statement is incredible. And by the way, if you were betting back then, you probably wouldn't have bet on this group expecting it to be a winning team. It's like there's the high school yearbook, and the question is who's most likely to succeed. This movement wouldn't have been on a most likely to succeed list. When Luke puts pen to paper here to reference this verse, even then, Luke is Paul's traveling companion, and he says elsewhere that these men are turning the world upside down. They've only been into a few cities of the world, and it's a statement for commotion. When Luke writes his own experience with Paul, it's not that the message is taking over towns, villages, districts, counties, peninsulas, states, nations. No, it's causing a ruckus, and you have these little home groups that are establishing. So when he's writing this, there's nothing to give rise, humanly speaking, to think that we're on this super winning team. Faith is good. Faith kind of looks beyond the present into the future. There's a statement here by a Jewish leader. He says, guys, time out. Listen, if this is just some human fad, it's going to evaporate. But if God is in this, you're not going to be able to stop it. And you know what happened? It didn't really even happen in Luke's day. We can look over our shoulders now. We have 2,000 years of church history. You know what happened? They weren't able to stop it, is what happened. Because the Jesus story is a winning team. I want to ask you a question. Do you want to be a player on a winning team? Barry and I, my wife, we dumped the TV. And I'm not saying you need to do that. We anymore now with the internet, we watch stuff and, we can just flip open the computer and, get visual stuff we want. And in the evenings, we'll look at stuff. For whatever reason, we kind of drifted into looking at some major athletes, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, some of the real greats. And, a lot of little boys, dream about being on an NBA team or, a professional football team. Guys dream it. But the way you get into it is you practice. There's an old saying, champions do every day what others do occasionally. I mention that because I want you to be a champion. The gospel is a winning team. And I want you to work yourself out, to practice when we get into the new year, to resolve, to go back to the basic disciplines of what it means to be a winner on this winning team. Vince Lombardi is a legendary coach, and I recall a story. He gets before his team and he holds it up and he says, "This is a basketball, a football." And he drills the basics. If you want to be successful in the sport, you have to master the basics, and you have to keep repeating and developing excellency with the basics. Similarly, every couple times a year as a cop, I'm forced to go into a training on firearms, and we review the basics, point, sight alignment, stance, target acquisition. I don't want to bore you with all that, but you just are drilled in the basics and you go out there and fire. It's muscle memory. It's all about the basics. If people are going to be successful in marriage, it's about practicing the basics. Similarly, in a walk with the Lord, it's the basics. And I think personally, and here's where you might not be altogether pleased with me. Some people think, well, if you say Yeshua instead of Jesus, you'll get, access to heaven. Say the right name. There's, it's mystical. There's, if you just reconfigure the syllables, then you'll get heaven's attention and get biblical medicine for your life's assorted hurts. I think a lot of that's mythical. I think if you want to be excellent and get God's attention and be a champion on this championship team, I think that you have to practice the basics. Prayer, fellowship, biblical attention, literacy, witnessing, being game to talk about the Lord, other things that we do to work ourselves out, tithing, just the plain old basics. And that doesn't sound interesting. Man, you go and so-and-so says you say this prayer this way and go to this church, and that's where the power is really moving. And Jeffrey, it sounds to me that you're talking about work. Well, what's interesting is I think sometimes if things sound too good to be true, they probably are. Old school. I think we go back to the basics. Well, I don't want to get to preaching too much on it. In the 5th chapter of Acts, the disciples have caused a ruckus. They've gotten the attention of the authorities who seized them. They were spirited away secretly, miraculously, and then they went and they spoke publicly again in the temple compound, only to be rearrested. And now what are we going to do with these people? And someone stands up and says, if this is of God, it's going to succeed. Listen, the message goes forth. The ministry goes forth. The ministers are stumbling. Let me encourage you in this new secular year to pick up your game. Get out there. It's a winning team. Practice the basics and be a winning player on the winning team. God bless you. Jeffrey Seif, same time, same station. Let's do this again next week.